What's going on, everybody? So glad you decided to click on this video. Today is our midweek lesson. Let's get it going. Can I admit something to you guys? I do not understand the internet at all. I mean, I understand how to use it, and I love watching YouTube videos as much as anyone. But when I think about how it works, it's a mystery to me. I mean, how is it possible that I can type a few words on my laptop and someone at an Amazon warehouse in another state gets a notification instantly? Or how can I have some friend in another country, some iChat, and they have a pop-up on their screen in a few seconds? The other day, I got a Snapchat from a friend of mine who was flying. Not only did the plane not crash while he was using his phone, but he was actually able to get a photo that he took from atop the clouds from his phone into my phone while I was sitting at my desk on the ground. How is that possible? One word: magic. No, not really. But it feels that way, doesn't it? The way that words and pictures and music travel without wires across the ocean and even through space, it's mind-boggling. It happens in nanoseconds with millions of devices using it at the same time. But somehow nothing really gets mixed up. Thinking about it makes my head hurt. Maybe God feels like that to you. He seems like magic. You come to church and you hear people talk about how great He is, or how He loves you, how He made you. They talk about their relationship with Him as if it's the most normal thing in the world, but there's one problem, and no one seems to mention it. You can't see Him. Is that weird to anybody else? Maybe it's something different for you. Maybe you tried praying and it was weird because you asked a question and heard nothing. Just crickets. You tried again and nothing. You hear people talking about their great relationship with God. Some people will even say He spoke to them. But how does that work when you can't actually hear Him? See, it's easy to believe the internet even when we can't see it. Why? Because we see evidence. We get the music. We hear the sounds. But when it comes to God, we're not getting messages or files or music from Him in our phones. The whole idea of Him, it's a little harder to wrap our heads around. How are we supposed to know someone that we cannot see? How are we supposed to have a conversation with someone who doesn't talk back? Why does this whole God thing seem to work for other people? And if we're honest, even if we have these questions, most of the time, we just don't think about it. It's like me and Wi-Fi. As long as it's working, it doesn't bother me that I don't understand it. But when things don't work out how we want them to, the questions start to matter more. When you're waiting on results of a tryout, your parents' finances aren't doing very well and you don't know what's going to happen. Your girlfriend stops talking to you. Your sister gets a diagnosis. Tornado hits the town. You may fail a class. Moments like that, there's something in us that wants to know that the world around us isn't random, that somehow it's wired and we're wired to work in a certain way, and that somebody or something has our back. Even if there's nothing crazy happening in our life right now, I bet there's a part of you that has questions. Even if you've been a Christian for a long time, sometimes this whole thing feels a little strange, doesn't it? If you've ever had questions or doubts like that, I want you to know two things. You're not alone. Almost everyone, even the super Christians, have those thoughts from time to time. Number two, God's not mad. He isn't threatened when you have doubts or questions. No lightning bolts are going to come your way. But there are some things in the Bible that can be helpful when we think about God and what it looks like to be in a relationship with Him. So we're going to look at some of those things today. We're going to go all the way back to the book of Genesis, the first book in the Bible, and see what it says about God's relationship with people. The very first words in the Bible say this: "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." It all begins with creation. The Bible goes on to list all the things that God created on the first few days: heavens, earth, water, birds, animals, plants. It's a long list, but after each day, the Bible shows that God looks at the world and says that it is good. And a lot of people have opinions on how this actually went down, Was it actually 7 days? How did God do that? How did he create things in this order? Those are really good questions that we could spend a lot of time trying to answer, but for now, I want you to think about this one thing. No matter how it happened or how long it took, there was a creation. God is making a point of letting us know that it wasn't by accident. He intentionally wired the earth to function. It's not random. But the writer of Genesis goes on to say something even more interesting. So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. Not only did God wire the universe to function in a certain way, but he also wired humanity. He created us intentionally to function and interact with the earth. But he also created us differently than anything else. He created us in his own image. If God created us in his image, that means there are parts of him hardwired into us. There are things about him reflected in us. Maybe you've never noticed that, or maybe you have, but you just don't know what to call it. But we see evidence of that all the time. I want you to think about the last time you saw something amazing in nature. Maybe it was a trip to the beach, or maybe you went camping in the mountains. Maybe it was a sunset or a powerful thunderstorm. Whatever it was, you still remember it. There's something about nature, especially the parts of it that only God could create, that move us, that make us feel something. It doesn't matter if you're a Christian or not. It doesn't matter how much you go to church. This happens to all of us. And when it does, it's the image of God working in you. Just like he looked at all the things he created and saw that it was good, that part of him in you looks at the most amazing things in nature and tells you, this is good. The image of God is everywhere we imagine, and it's more than just nature. We've all felt something move in us when we see a firefighter rescue someone in danger, or if we see people who run into tragedy and help other people. YouTube videos about classmates or teammates who rally around somebody that has a disability and make them feel awesome. Movies like Unbroken that show forgiveness when they have scenes that are impossible. It's not random that movies make us feel the most and stick with us the longest, are also the ones that display characteristics of God in the clearest way. Things like kindness, forgiveness, sacrificing oneself for the care of others. Those are characteristics of God and the things that we notice best in others. The image of God is everywhere we imagine. The truth about my phone, my iPad, all the other devices I own is this: nothing is really wireless. There's a wire somewhere on a modem inside our phone or server that transmits a signal to something else that is wired the same way. It seems like magic, but there is a wire somewhere. The same is true for God and us. When we don't see him or evidence of the way he wired us or the world, it could seem unbelievable, crazy even. But when we begin to see the evidence of his wiring, it becomes a little less, or he becomes a little less invisible to us. It's great news. What do we do with that? Let's fast forward a few books and read a verse from Deuteronomy. It says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength." Moses is telling the people of Israel, the people who had been raised hearing the stories of creation, of Adam and Eve, and of God's imprint and vision being on every person, the most important thing for us to do is love this God. Just love him. That sounds crazy because we can't see him, but God said to do this because we're wired to. The image of God in us makes it possible to love him. Look for evidence of God, and when you see it, acknowledge him, thank him, appreciate him. That's loving him. In the next couple of weeks, we're going to talk about different ways to do this, but it starts with this. Look for God. Let the image of God in you look for the image of God everywhere. The image of God is everywhere we imagine. So let me ask you a question. Have you ever had a crush on someone that you've known forever? Maybe it was someone you went to kindergarten with, played with toddler soccer or something like that, and then all of a sudden in high school we were like, oh, Maybe it was your next door neighbor. You see each other all the time, and then one day, you notice them in a different way. Nearly every love story begins with two people who finally notice each other. In fact, the opposite's true too. It's really hard for people to love each other if they never stop to notice each other. They never pay attention. So while this whole series will give us a number of ways that we can love God, I want you to know that it starts with this one idea. Notice Him. Pay attention. Even if it's just for this week, to see where His wires are obvious in the world. When you see an awesome sunset, notice Him. When the weather's perfect and you just feel great, notice Him. When you do something nice for another person and something in you feels good about it, even though you didn't benefit from it, that's His image in you, so notice Him. When you see a commercial about a parent and a child and it just gets to you, remember, He's the perfect father. Notice Him. When you realize your mom loves you even when you don't deserve it, that's His wiring in her. Notice Him. And I think you'll find that the more you notice Him, the easier it'll be to love Him. I want you to know that if you're still not sure about God and whether or not He exists, that's okay. And if this whole idea of noticing God in everyday life sounds really strange to you, that's okay too. But I dare you to at least try it. Just try to pay attention for 1 week. Take notice of all the things that move you in a good way. Was it something heroic, self-sacrificing, loving, kind, creative, funny? Those are also words that describe God. It's possible that you're noticing His wiring in humanity without even realizing it. After all, the image of God is everywhere that we imagine. As you're out and about today, I want you to think of one place that you see the evidence of God's wiring. Maybe it's in nature or in others or even in yourself. But no matter where you find Him, pay attention and use that as a moment to move closer to Him. I think you'll discover that even while you can't see Him, you're able to notice His wiring in more places than you've ever imagined.